David Masover, you put a post up on LinkedIn. Is that what we call them now? Posts? I can't get the posts and articles, whatever. LinkedIn changes their style all the time, which is one of the things that drives me crazy about the platform, even though it's a great platform to connect with people and have discussions and really hopefully spur more of videos like this that we can really get together and actually talk some of these things out rather than trying to type. And I've got fat thumbs, so my comments all the way to the thread. But you made a post a couple of weeks ago. How much research should you do before making a cold call? And I
Yep.
knew that was clickbait. I knew you were trying to get
It was not clickbait. Come
you
on.
are you're an instigator, David. What kind of a question is that? What were you hoping to get at? Because you know there's a lot more to unpack there than even we can in a few minutes here on this video.
Listen, I'm a very simple guy. When I'm ready to create a post or whatever it is they call it, you know what I do? I look back at my calendar and I look at the conversations that I've had. And that's where that came from. I had a client who just was not getting enough activity done, excuse me, because he was just spending a lot of time doing a lot of research that was way over the top, completely unnecessary. And when we dug into it, he recognized it. And then we got to the real issue, which is, okay, what do we need to do to get you more confident and to get your skills up so that we can get you on the phone more and researching less? So I appreciate your very colorful style. But no, it wasn't clickbait. It was a real world problem that David Masover is helping to solve. So thank you very much.
So I commented that I didn't have enough information to answer the question, but
Fair enough.
in general, I think that if you're selling something that's more transactional, you don't need to do a whole lot of research. And if you're selling something that's more consultative, you need to do a fair amount of research, but typically that research is really based on just being able to make the connections so you can keep the ball moving. Like my goal in
Yes.
any sales process is to, one, know what the next step is, and two, make sure that I can get a commitment for that next step. Doesn't matter how
Yes.
many steps there eventually are. Let's just keep the conversation going. But I see people getting the research thing wrong. And, you know, when I first started, it was, hey, you're not researching your clients enough. You're not researching your prospects enough. You have no way to go ahead and connect them. That turned into, you got to prepare for sales calls. Okay. Then that turned into, well, if some is good, then more is better. And now we're way off the spectrum in terms of how much research is being done. And with all
Yeah.
the data you have, or data, depending on what, you know, where you're
Right.
you've got all this information at your fingertips. It's easy to get paralyzed by that. So how do you guide your clients through this? I know you coach a lot of individuals. You're working with some sales teams now too. You've got a great background in startups and tech and everything. I mean, how do you determine where your guideposts are and what's enough, what's too much?
I'm going to go back to the I'm a simple guy thing. I mean, back in the day when all I was a sales guy, and we're all still sales guys, I just really didn't know what to research. You know, I mean, I kept hearing that people were doing all this research on their clients. And I'm thinking, okay, so I've done 5 or 10 minutes. I looked at their website. I looked them up. I kind of know who's there. I understand a little bit about their business. How deep do you really want to go? Obviously, you know, there's a lot of different situations, but I think you hit the nail on the head. What you want to do is to be able to get into a conversation, to engage the prospect and have a conversation about what's going on in their world. What you don't want to do is not have the basic information, right? You should know what they do. You should know how that works in their space. You don't need to be an expert on it. But I never believed, you know, it's funny. A couple of years ago on LinkedIn, there were people who were actually saying, you should know what your client's problem is before you actually go into the meeting. And I mean, people were getting behind that. I don't know if you remember that or not. It's not such a popular position now, but people were really saying that. And I felt like the lone wolf voice in the wilderness that said, that's ridiculous. Get into the conversation, establish some credibility, have a conversation. Because you telling your prospect what you think their problem is quite different than you engaging in a conversation where the problem evolves from the conversation from their mouth in the context of a conversation where you've established yourself with some expertise and some credibility.
So you hit on something right there, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And this idea of a sales conversation. Now, this is not a new term. Neither of you can copyright this or anything like that
Darn.
for a long time. But I think there's a difference between a sales pitch and a sales conversation.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place to pitch. And at the end of the day, whenever you're, explaining what it is that you, or however you help, that is a form of a pitch, even if it doesn't sound pitchy. But people hate to be pitched to. But they don't mind having conversations around things that they're passionate about and things that can help them move forward with their goals. But I think if you contrast the pitch versus a conversation, and I take that and the analog of that as the salesperson is, instead of trying to pick the perfect thing to say at the right time, be someone who's worth talking to.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go and pitch and you know that you got to hit that out of the park because you're only going to have these 30 seconds to pitch somebody because they don't like being pitched to, why don't you take a different tack and say, well, why don't I start a conversation? Why don't I present myself, whether it's with the questions I ask or it's with the social proof that I have out there if people were to look up my name in my record while they're on the phone with me? And why don't I spend time demonstrating that I'm worth not only having this conversation, but the next one and maybe the one after that? And I think that approach is vastly different. And it does what you and I are talking about. Like, how do we know if we have the answer to the problem? Right? We don't even know what answers are out there to the problems that we haven't uncovered yet. But I think where real magic happens is when the sales rep can, kind of stand beside the prospect, walk through their process with them, walk through the customer's journey with them, and show that they're an asset, that they're a resource, and that they will find new problems together, and together they'll be able to solve those problems. Those are the home runs that we're all looking for. You can't do that in 15 seconds, and you can't do that by making assumptions.
And I think that actually circles the conversation right back to where we started it with research. So if you think about what should I be doing with my research time, obviously you need to know however much research time there is, right? But yeah, you need to know something about the person who you're going to be talking to. But the way that you're going to have a really great conversation with somebody is, your product and service inside and out. You know your industry inside and out. You know the kinds of things that your customers have been using your product and service for. You have some case histories that you know backwards and forwards, just as not a document on your laptop, but just it's part of who you are. You have taken the time to really become an expert in your industry. You cannot add value if you don't take some time to learn something. So learn your industry, your space, all of this stuff, and then find a way to get into a conversation and be someone worth talking to. I think that's excellent. I think that's absolutely excellent and spot on.
Well, thank you. But I think there are a lot of ways that you can do that. And when you get to know customers of a certain type, you don't need to do that research over and over and over again. And
No, absolutely not.
the point of over preparing, right? I mean, when you sell into a vertical, when you sell into an industry, or even when you sell to a type of business, maybe it's across certain industries, but they're family owned, or, that there are a certain set of problems and the specifics really don't even need to be discovered. You just need to know enough to open up a credible and meaningful conversation.
Yep.
And so then to circle all the way back and say, how much research do you need to do? I think you need to do enough to make a credible opening to a meaningful conversation. And
Yep.
in some cases, that's going to be this much research. In other cases, you're going to need a law degree in order to do it, in order to be taken seriously enough to talk about those things. But I guess I hope what people take from this as they watch it is that all politics are local, so to speak, and that what they feel is probably the right thing to do is probably the right thing to do, regardless of talking heads or whatever. Be open to new information, be open to changing the way that you're doing things. But if what you're doing is working, there's not a specific way that everybody has to do it.
Yep.
That's fair, or have I overstepped my bounds, Coach?
No, I think you hit on something really important. How you feel, and it came out in some of the comments in the thread on the post or whatever you call it that you referred to. When you feel confident, that you have the knowledge of the industry, and the knowledge of your product, and the knowledge of your service, and the knowledge of the vertical, and you feel that you have the skills to get through a sales conversation effectively, where it sounds like a conversation and looks like a conversation and feels like a conversation, but you know where you'd like it to go, you know what you're looking for. When you have that level of confidence, I think what happens is your brain chatter kind of quiets down. When you are not feeling confident because you've done the work that it takes to get confident, it's tough to have a sales conversation because your little mind is just chattering, 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 chattering. When you've done the work to become confident, however much that is, there is no specific quantity. But when you feel like you can enter that conversation and say, yeah, I know how to open this thing. As we talk with each other, I know how to add value. I know how to listen. I know how to ask good questions. When you're feeling that, you're probably going to have a good sales conversation, and that's probably going to lead you to the right amount of research.